What's up, everybody? Good morning. We have made it to Wednesday, and we have made it to what I believe will be the last day of our head coaching candidate evaluations for the Seattle Seahawks. Of course, I'll do another one if there's some dark horse candidate that comes out of nowhere that the Seahawks are actually interviewing with and looking at and seeming very interested in. So I'm not going to completely close the door here, but it's hard to imagine the Seahawks finding anyone that I haven't already discussed at length. So we are basically at the very back end of the list here. Just a couple final guys that I want to discuss and see how we feel after looking at their resumes. So, tomorrow the plan is I'm going to take all these candidates that I've looked at over the past couple weeks and put them into a sort of tier list to see who I like the most, who I like the least, and try to get a feel for how I'm approaching this head coaching hire. So we've got one guy this morning, and this is the youngest one yet. In fact, this guy is a couple months older than me. This guy is as young as it gets, and that's probably disqualifying right there. But I'll tell you, the resume is pretty good. It's Joe Brady. Joe Brady, 34 years old when the season starts next year. And this guy, he's done some nice things. I'll say that. He was working his way up really nicely through the coaching ranks. Kind of got derailed by a stop with Mr. Tepper in Carolina, and then he kind of righted the ship the last couple years in Buffalo. I don't know if it's going to be enough for him to actually get a head coaching job right now, but he's probably not that far away. So, honestly, this resume is pretty credible outside of his 2 year stint in Carolina, but we're going to need more. We're just going to need more. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to say anything too negative about him, but we need to see him have a good full season as an offensive coordinator, I think, before we start talking head coach. And I say full season because he has a really good half season, not even half season actually, and that's about it. So Joe Brady was the guy who got promoted to offensive coordinator after the Buffalo Bills fired Ken Dorsey when they lost to the Broncos in Week 10. So he got to coach the last 7 games of the season as the offensive coordinator, and he did well overall. Mostly what he did was balance the offense out. They ran the ball more, and they were able to kind of even out the turnover problem they were having, and he got some very positive press because of that. So that's definitely a positive. In terms of points per game, they went up a little bit under his coaching. It was at about 26. He was about 27. During the 7 games he coached, Buffalo averaged 27 points a game, which was 6th in the league, and it was a little bit more than they were doing before. Now, their EPA went down significantly. With Ken Dorsey, the EPA was above point 0.1. With Joe Brady, it was 0.071. That's because when you run the ball more, even if you're running the ball well, your EPA is still going to go down because running the ball is just inherently less effective than passing the ball, even when there are occasional turnovers thrown in there. That's just how football works. That's just how EPA works. It's still probably worth it to do, so I'm not knocking him for that. And 0.071 was still 6th in the league over that period of time, so still really, really good. And during that time, he was also the quarterback coach. He's been the quarterback coach for Josh Allen the last 2 years, and no one's denying that Josh Allen has suffered with the loss of Brian Daboll going to New York. But over the last 2 years, Josh Allen has still remained a fairly effective player. Fairly effective, more like very effective player. The turnovers are up, and that's unfortunate, but when you lose somebody like Brian Daboll, it's just tough to fill those shoes. Still, 4,300 yards, 29 touchdowns, 18 picks, ran for 15 touchdowns and over 500 yards. And remember, early in the season, Buffalo was making a concerted effort to not let Josh Allen run. They kind of gave up on that in the second half of the year and let him run more, and it was effective. Good completion percentage as well. So Josh Allen had another good season. In 2022, Joe Brady was just the quarterback coach for Josh Allen, and he was probably better. About the same number of yards, more touchdowns, fewer interceptions, had more rushing yards, higher QB rating, a little bit lower completion percentage. So Josh Allen, he's had 2 really good years. They're just not as good as some of the years he had when Daboll was there. So read into it how you will. So, yeah, Joe Brady has done good work in Buffalo overall, not knocking him. But again, he has less than half a good year at coordinator. Because when he was the coordinator in Carolina for 2 years in 2020 and 2021, it was bad. Now, I don't know if that's really his fault. You're working under Matt Rule. You don't have a quarterback. You don't have a lot of tools to work with. There's just not a lot going on in Carolina for you to even have a chance. But the 2021, they had one of the worst offenses in football. They had a negative .132 EPA per play, which is awful. 30th in the league. They didn't score, but 18 points a game. 2020 was a little bit better, 22 points a game. Actually, a positive EPA, which is nice. But on the whole, we're still talking a below average to bad offense here. So what he did in Carolina has definitely kind of slowed his role, even though he's still well ahead of the curve here because of how young he is. So I still think that Joe Brady's probably going to get a head coaching job sooner rather than later, but I don't think it's going to happen now because of the fact that he just needs one full good season. And he probably will have that next year in Buffalo because assuming they make him the permanent offensive coordinator, there's enough talent and enough good stuff going on there for him to be really, really good. So, where Joe Brady made his bones was in college football at LSU, and this was the stuff of legends. This nearly fast-tracked him to a head coaching job in the NFL. What he did in LSU at 2019, the passing game coordinator / wide receiver coach for one of the greatest passing attacks in college football history. 2019, they threw for over 6,000 yards, 61 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, over 75% completion. Joe Burrow put up most of those numbers. Joe Burrow had one of the greatest college football seasons ever. And LSU won the national title on the back of their passing attack. Like, this is something that warrants taking a few minutes to just go, wait a minute here. I know he's young, but there might be something really special here. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall Jr. That's 3 receivers that would go in the first 2 rounds, including 2 that would go in the first round. Jamar Chase was a first rounder. Justin Jefferson was a first rounder. You also had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was part of that passing attack. He would go on to be a first rounder. Thaddeus Moss at tight end. It was one of the most prolific passing attacks ever. It's just, it's college football. And look, the dude had primo talent. He's not going to have that kind of talent advantage ever in the NFL. We know that. But still, got to give him flowers for this one, man. And before he went to LSU, he started in the Sean Payton tree as an offensive assistant in New Orleans 2017-2018 for 2 elite offenses. 3rd in points, 2nd in EPA per play, 4th in points, 2nd in EPA per play. So his resume is sterling outside of his stint in Carolina, which may have been impossible to succeed given that circumstance. It might have just been an unfair battle for him. So Joe Brady, great resume. If we hired him as head coach, I would be very confused, but I wouldn't be completely repulsed by it either because there's so much potential here, so much promise. I just feel like you gotta get a little bit more of a sure commodity right now. Maybe in a couple years we can revisit the Joe Brady conversation. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.